Hey, welcome back to Trek on the Tube and welcome back to another Star Trek review, but first, we grieve. We mourn, we cry at the immense sadness brought upon us by the death of Star Trek. Alex Kurtzman has been fired, production on all shows has ceased, actors, writers, designers, everyone has lost their jobs, sets are being stripped down, merchandise is being burnt in piles in the streets. Oh no, wait, I forgot. That's all bullshit. Star Trek is like Bender, it's back, baby. And guess what? They built it better with blackjack and hookers. I'm sorry. I'm stalling. While we're on the topic of stalling, for those that are interested in winning the first season Blu-ray for Lower Decks, I have a giveaway running at the moment. Go check out my overview of the set to know how to enter. And just as an update, I'll be keeping the entries open until the 19th of this month and announcing the winner in the first video following that date. So yes, I'm stalling, but why? Mainly because I had trouble writing this review, if I'm honest. I struggled with finding the appropriate words, but I think I've got it. Anyway, this is my review and Easter eggs video for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 2, Episode 1, Strange Energies. The way this goes, for anyone that's new, welcome. The way this goes is, first I talk about my thoughts, my opinions, everything that concerns the plot and the story and the episode itself, and then I have another segment where I talk about the Easter eggs and references to other iterations of Star Trek or just general pop culture that I could find. Of course, the list is non-exhaustive because I can't find everything every time, sadly. Also, just to clarify, the reason why these videos don't come out the same day as the episode is because I don't have time to do that. Even if I did, hunting for Easter eggs takes a while, and also I just like to reflect on what I saw. You know, watch it again, discuss the episode with others, etc. So even if I could, I wouldn't. Which I guess transitions us quite well into my opening statement. This episode wasn't quite as fun upon rewatch. Now, my colleagues over on the Starfleet War discussion I did kinda already felt that way, but at the time I didn't. I had only seen it once, I think. Now that I've seen it multiple times, however, yeah, it's not a standout episode, and I guess if we're really being picky, it is a bit rough around the edges, not as refined or as polished as the back half of Season 1 was. So putting aside the fact it was probably my hype for the return of the season that created such an positive initial response, what are the things that didn't work so well? For starters, the dynamic between Mariner and Freeman and the established degree of partnership that they had felt kinda off. Like, yes, the episode was simply trying to show that both characters can get along and be good officers, but on their own terms and at a distance from one another, but it was pushed so much, so hard, that it ended up really just being nepotism within Starfleet and poor decision making on Captain Freeman's part. Funny thing is, they didn't even need that as a reason to get Ransom to go all crazy, and they could have found another way to fix the situation. Continuing on with the theme of too much, the Tendi Rutherford subplot was batshit crazy. To be clear, the concept itself was fine, and I very much adore both characters and their hijinks. It's just that the intensity got a bit out of hand. Zapping the guy was already extreme, let's be honest. To get to the point where she was actually going to remove his brain, I mean, that went too far. It got Badgie level for me. If you recall, when the episode came out, I enjoyed the concept of Badgie, you know, that crazy computer helper, but I somewhat disagreed with the extent of the violence within the Star Trek concept. Even if they got a free pass because it was all, you know, happening in a holodeck, this wasn't, though. Tendi was just completely insane, and this ain't no holodeck thing. My point is, these two problems, added to the fact the Ransom situation never really carried any weight to it, made the episode unbalanced. I wouldn't say uneven, because the pacing worked, the animation was as high quality as ever, if not better. The voice acting was impeccable, and unlike some others, I didn't miss Shax or Boimler. I love them both, but I don't know, I didn't miss them this time around. The story kept me focused enough to not feel their absence. So yeah, unbalanced. And I know it's bizarre to say, but as extreme and over the top this particular style of animated show is, or even sitcoms in general, when they, exaggerate certain character traits to get a message across, I guess, Lower Decks, in its best episodes, is very much able to not sacrifice too much plot logic or inner-universe rules to get its jokes across. It's able to stay Star Trek-ish, if you know what I mean. And this time, it kinda didn't. I'm not a hater. I promise. I love this show. It's just how I feel. And come on. We're spending time here on 3 negative points from the 7 out of 10 I gave this thing. Instead, we really should spend time on the 7 positive points, because yes, it was still a very fun episode and a solid start to this new season. Did I laugh wholeheartedly? No, but it got a few chuckles out of me. The whole becoming a god trope has been done many times before, but it's always delightful to see our new favorite shows do their own take on things. The references to Gary Mitchell and the original series never felt crammed or fan servicey. On the contrary, one could almost argue the whole Gary Mitchell element to the episode isn't even an Easter egg, it's just Starfleet looking back at its own history, at its own events, so that was all done very well. It felt very natural. And as I mentioned earlier, the animation is still beautiful. It's actually probably the best animation I have ever seen in any animated TV show ever, like, period. I'm blown away by how this thing looks. It's just amazing. Not only that, but the directing was noticeably bold in this episode. Yeah, the quality of the animation, the way the scenes are lit, the special effects, dare I say, when the ship gets flung around, all of that helps elevate the show, but the camera angles and the setups, those are the decisions made by the director, and they were such good decisions, bold decisions. Rutherford lying on his back after getting hit by the chair, that was just so dynamic. It's just to cite one example. It made the scene really dynamic. And then there's those little things, like when the trio were chatting in the brig, and how sometimes the characters are behind the force field. That doesn't have to be done. After establishing the force field is there in the scene, then we just simply need to go back and forth from one angle to the other, but nope. They put in that blue, as if to simulate placement of camera, and it's attention to detail that I find remarkable. The music was, as usual, also nice, even if not remarkable, during the intense moments of Ransom's god trip. More functional, I'd say, but still good. To finish this off, let me hit you with some random comments and observations. It was obvious to me the opening sequence was a holodeck sequence, but that didn't change a thing when it comes to my enjoyment of it. It's not like the reveal, was the bit. The end sequence with Boimler and Riker was, as most people will probably agree, super exciting and super intriguing. I am a bit disappointed Rutherford's memory loss was somewhat brushed over or not so much dived into, but I guess we'll wait to see a little more of the season before truly complaining about that. The line sci-fi stuff from Mariner didn't work for me. I don't like it when they say that kind of stuff in this show. It works for Rick and Morty, it works for Solar Opposites, I find, but not for this. Freeman saying Starfleet doesn't prioritize aesthetics felt weird because they're there to help, and come on, this wasn't just a cleaning job, it was a sanitization operation and a depollution act, so yeah, it felt more than just like aesthetic, it felt like something that was necessary. And then of course we have to talk about Rutherford's date, and her mentioning her sister, and how her sister can't help but talk about how she's joined now. I think that was really great. For some reason I equated that in my mind to the joke about how vegans always have to point out, that they're vegans or talk about their veganism. Maybe I read into this too much, but I don't know, it cracked me up. I like that joke. Conclusion. It's a good episode. Yeah, the delicate balance between how ridiculous an animated sitcom can get and how Star Trek this show should be isn't quite achieved, but that doesn't make it a difficult or disagreeable watch in any way. And I'm still super excited to see where the rest of the season takes us, and it still is my favorite new Star Trek show of this Kurtzman era, Star Trek Renaissance, however the hell you want to call it. I hope you now better understand why this was a difficult review for me to do. It's an episode that isn't bad in any way. It's just that it was more easy to talk about the things that I didn't like than the things I did like, and it's always not nice when that happens, because it comes across as if we didn't like the episode, we're hating on the episode, but it's not the fact. It's just sometimes it takes longer to talk about what we disagree with. no matter how small the things we didn't like are. Moving on to the Easter eggs and references part of the video, starting with, I don't know, I guess the holodeck sequence, why not? The opening shot features multiple Galore-class Cardassian vessels seen before in Deep Space Nine and introduced in the Next Generation, as well as a space dock dug into an asteroid, which is very reminiscent of where the Tholians were hiding the Defiant in Enterprise. Shout out to Chris, aka the Trek Collector. It's also reminiscent of actual Cardassian bases we've seen before in Deep Space Nine. We then see an exact recreation of the room Picard was kept in the Next Generation episode Chain of Command, from the door to the lights to the chair, the desk, all of it, as well as an actual Cardassian. And I know it might not be too much of an Easter egg, but I did want to talk about her for a second, because she has no blue makeup on her forehead, and apparently that's got people mad. So let's just calm down, alright, let's settle down, and say that there have been Cardassian females in Star Trek without blue makeup before. And even if that weren't the case, not everyone wears makeup. Not everyone is the same. We're allowed to have differences. Come on. Also, as explained by one of the creatives involved with the show, thought was put into this particular decision. It wasn't a mistake. They didn't forget. You know, he tweeted about, thinking about this and debating this for weeks. Moving along, we then see a holographic Boimler that says something to the effect of "they keep on showing me lights," which is also a direct reference to the Next Generation episode Chain of Command. Mariner then continues her escape, Cardassian phase disruptor pistol in hand, from Deep Space Nine, along a platform/bridge that actually felt a bit more Star Wars than Star Trek, even if we've seen such things before in the franchise. Mariner then beams herself onto a ship that I identified as Avenger class, a non-canon type of vessel that resembles the Miranda class, but it would seem I have to apologize to both Starfleet Boy and Boatrek because they are probably right. I'm sorry. It would seem that indeed the vessel is a Miranda class type ship. It's not an Avenger class. The Miranda class, you will recognize the ship class as being heavily featured in the film The Wrath of Khan. I hope you will forgive me, oh Starfleet Boy and Mr. Boatrek. Again, the recreation of the interior is flawless. The following ships we see on screen are a Jem'Hadar attack ship and a Bajoran interceptor, both featured in Deep Space Nine. We then see this thing, which the internet has successfully identified as a Romulan heavy cruiser from the non-canon 1997 video game Star Trek Starfleet Academy. The big question is, does that now make this particular design canon? Yes, within the realm of holonovels. But of course, it hasn't at this time been confirmed as being an active design in like the in-universe fleet. There's nuance to the way canon works. Moving on. I say this because in the very next scene among the Danube class runabouts and other Cardassian and Klingon designs like the Hideki class, there are multiple Delta flyers, which clearly is another holoprogram creative license. Now, while there aren't any more specifically Deep Space Nine references, there are a few Next Generation ones, so let's talk about them. Mariner drops a line about not being able to have interpersonal conflict, which is a meta joke about how Star Trek's primary creator, Gene Roddenberry, didn't want any interpersonal conflict on the Next Generation. And then we yet again get a reference to Cetacean Ops, the Dolphin Command Center that supposedly various ships of the fleet have. Maybe we'll get to see that shit someday, I hope. In the random collection of Easter eggs list, we could cite the three-dimensional chess set seen here. It's a classic Star Trek Easter egg at this point. These are the T-88s that Rutherford and Tendi was so hype about in Lower Decks Season 1, so yes, the show is now officially referencing itself. Captain Freeman, among her items, has one of the crystals from last season, a second reference to Lower Decks itself, and also there are ships in bottles, something pretty common both in real life and in Star Trek. Courtesy of the eagle-eyed York over on Twitter, we have a beautiful montage of this device that has been featured in so much Star Trek. So don't ask me what it is. It's a prop from the 90s era Star Trek, and now it's in this. Barnes, Rutherford's love interest of the week, talks about her sister being joined because she's a Trill, and some Trill have the honor of being joined to symbionts. If you want to learn more about that, I have a video up, link in the description. It's arguably neither a Deep Space Nine or a Next Generation reference anymore, because even Discovery has done some heavy Trill stuff recently, so I guess it's just a general Star Trek thing now. Before we finish off this Easter egg section with the real big stuff, let's first drop a little shout out to all of the artists working on this show for making this second season even prettier than the first. In particular, the title sequence. You're all amazing and it looks stunning. Don't think we didn't notice. Actually, truth be told, at first I didn't notice. I didn't watch the title sequence the first time around. I just assumed it would be the same, so I did something else. But I watched the other times, and yeah, there are variances in the title sequence. Nothing major, but still things worth noting, like, for example, there are more ships attacking the Borg cubes, and so many more details on the Cerritos itself. It just looks, generally speaking, prettier. Now for the big stuff, Gary Mitchell. Yes, that's right, this episode is all about someone going godlike, and though that does happen now and then in Star Trek, Gary Mitchell from the original series is the immediate example that comes to mind. And so it only made sense that the Cerritos would pull up Starfleet records on those events. What's really cool is Gary Mitchell was in the original series, but the way he was drawn on screen here is in this style of the animated series. So even if technically it's not an animated series Easter egg, it still kinda is. During his godlike moment, our Ransom detaches his head and attacks the ship with it. We've seen floating heads, floating hands, floating people in space before. This ain't no new thing for Star Trek. And then finally, the poem Nightingale Woman, that Ransom's best friend, sits down to read him, is the very same one that Gary Mitchell quoted back in the original series. And there we have it. All of the Easter eggs and all of the references that I could find so far. I'm sure there's so many more. Those were also my thoughts, my opinions. Did you like the video? I hope so. Did you like the episode? I hope so, I guess. I want the show to be successful, so you better like it. I want a million seasons of this thing. I think it's great. Strong start to season 2, even if somewhat unbalanced. But yeah, again, entries close on the 19th of this month if you want to win that Blu-ray for season 1, and then I'll be announcing the winner in a later video. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching the most professional of YouTube Star Trek content creators. Come on, look at the hair, look at the setup. It's all fantastic. You're all the best. Like, subscribe, share, tell your friends that I exist. I hope that Prodigy will be as cool, and I will be reviewing that as well. I'm rambling on. A big thanks to the channel patrons. Live long and prosper.